As soon as you see it.
Okay. All right. Today on Trekker's Delight, we will be talking about Benjamin Sisko, Starfleet's first, not first black captain, but first show that shows us a black captain. And we're here with Keith. We're here with Jermaine. We're here with William, and we are here with Marie, who I have not seen very often the past 6 months. We'll get into that later.
I feel a little judged, Jason. Not gonna lie.
No, no, never judged. All right. When we come back, we will after the credits. We will be talking about Benjamin Sisko.
So beautiful bean footage.
Bean footage. Every other vote.
I mean, I just want to know what we're going to be ready. Oh, wait, we're going live.
Here we are. Welcome once again to Trekker's Delight.
Like literally, my mic falls down just as we go live. Hi, everybody.
Why is that person not even moving behind you?
That's what you're paying attention to?
On a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh my God, no.
Love that baseball and the teacup. Like clearly, TNG DS9 fans.
This was a nice touch.
The most.
The most.
No, everybody. This is actually one of the main screenwriters for Prodigy, so we are super excited to hear from you. And
No one
also,
listened.
I'm a little embarrassed for being this critical.
Man, I really love that intro.
All right, so it is February 2024. We are in Black History Month, so we found that it would be necessary to bring to you to talk about some of the black characters in Star Trek that really push Star Trek forward. And we can't do that without mentioning Avery Brooks, who played Benjamin Sisko in Star Trek's DS9. We had 7 great seasons of DS9, which gives us so much to work with. As far as the character of Benjamin Sisko, as far as the actor Avery Brooks, who gave that character so much. I don't know who put more into it, the writers or Avery Brooks himself, but he, we should give him high marks uh, in general for being on the show, right? Uh, in general, is there anybody that does not like Benjamin Sisko as captain?
I mean, I sort of feel like if they did, they would have gotten booted off.
Right?
Also, that is a terrible
moving.
expression on which to have gotten frozen.
Are you frozen right now?
Mm-hmm.
She's looking like
Hold on.
I don't care what this dude's saying right now. That's the look she's giving.
Yeah, this is her shocked face.
Right? Like, really, dude?
Well,
I know. Look at me. Like I have 2 chins. This is ridiculous.
Did anyone watch Avery Brooks on Spencer for Hire?
Fun fact, I did not.
I
Like,
think
you
some
seen
of
him
stuff
after-
happened
Yes, I
before.
did. He was
you
wonderful.
wa- during the show running, you watched it, or you?
Yes,
or
I was a little kid. It
Yep.
was late at night, but yes, I watched it. I watched it just for him.
He was a badass.
Which show?
Yeah,
Spencer for Hire.
yeah, among other things.
Is that when he plays his hawk?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all.
Yep.
That's
Oh,
hard.
yeah. My mom watched that one.
I watched that one. That's great.
By the way,
Uh,
he was a fully realized black character. Like that I think that was what was so amazing about his character at that particular point in time.
Right. I remember
Absolutely.
we spoke about it. That even though when they first put him in Deep Space Nine, they completely changed his hairstyle. Even when he was in that other show, he was already bald with the whole beard and everything. But it's just like, but when they put him on season 1, they kind of inverted him.
Yeah, they said they didn't want him to be Hawk on Star Trek. They wanted him to be this other person, so they forced him to grow his hair and they told him to shave the goatee.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but we all know that like the best Sisko ended up coming when he grew his goatee and shaved his head.
Right.
And that first episode with the goatee was the first episode with Ira Stephen Bear as showrunner of Deep Space Nine.
Right.
So
That's season 4.
No, that's season 3.
3.
So once again, the final form of hair and facial hair is what gives us the best version of the character. I mean, this seems to happen a lot, from Riker to Geordi to Sisko. Yeah. I mean, and it's really weird that it's all the male characters, by the way.
Some female characters. Let's see. Janeway went through hair phases, definitely.
She did. She did.
And I like certain hair better than others.
Group has actually talked about like hating the bird's nest.
I feel like the producers have this like idea, this strict idea of what they want to do with hair. And then after seasons go by and they kind of just let that go, that the characters are so much better. Like after they get rid of the confines of what they feel the hair should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, she cannot have her hair down. Absolutely not. For Janeway, it's just like, let her have her hair down, dude. She doesn't have to tie it up in a bun all the time. Same with Avery Brooks. Same with we're glad Picard did not have a toupee.
Yeah, they had him try it, but no, that was a good move. Not. But then, of course, Kirk.
Marie, you're frozen again.
The what?
Marie, you're frozen again.
Oh,
good lord!
Is it AT&T? People talk about AT&T like all day. I don't
even
know
get
why.
me started on that.
Oh yeah, you were the guy that started that.
Me?
I don't know. Like I'm not. I mean,
if I send you the AT&T symbol, it means we're not communicating anymore.
Oh wow, that's how they do
No,
that.
it's just that AT&T system is down.
Yeah.
Anybody that has an AT&T phone cannot make phone calls or text messages today.
Yeah. Luckily, I had Xfinity in my house. So.
That's
which is
somewhat unacceptable.
very weird, but yeah.
I mean, were any of y'all affected or like?
No, not at all. And I have AT&T. I was
I got Cricket, and I thought that was AT&T's network.
I mean, there were even here in Arkansas, there were some people that weren't affected.
I'm on T-Mobile. Didn't bother me.
Well, back to Benjamin Sisko.
Who was born in Gary, Indiana. Not Benjamin Sisko.
Was?
But,
no.
Avery Brooks.
No.
Avery Brooks was.
Avery Brooks.
New Orleans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is a really important part of the character, right? Like that he is from New Orleans, and it's not just a question of the food, right?
Right.
Wait, but how awesome would it be if he was like nobody would ever have cast an important person on the show and be like, "I'm from Gary, Indiana."
You gotta.
Right?
You
He had to be like somewhere great, like
you gotta know how to cook because
Janeway's from Indiana.
It's through her stomach.
She is, but she ain't from no Gary, Indiana. I'll tell you that.
No,
I don't know how many of you've been to Gary, but yeah.
I can't say. I mean, I have family in Gary, but I can't say I know anything much about it.
Yeah,
I know exactly nothing about it.
It's an addictive song that gets stuck in your head.
Well, I do. Since we were talking about New Orleans, I did want to talk about not for a very long time. Captain, well, at the time, Commander Sisko. He came into Star Trek as a father, a recently what do you call it? A widower?
Yeah.
Yeah, a widower. All right. And I thought that I thought that was so interesting, especially for me, because at the time I was in high school when Deep Space Nine first came on. And so I was immediately like, okay, not only do I remember you from Spencer for Hire and then later on Hawk, but you now have a son who, maybe he's a little bit younger than me, but, perhaps I can see myself in that particular character. And that is what endeared me to the show and to him as a character.
Yes, but he was also noticeably different than he was as Hawk, right?
Oh,
So, but
no doubt.
both very strong characters,
No doubt.
but one was definitely a sidekick, hitman, whatever. And the other one was definitely
I would say restrained.
Starfleet material.
Yeah.
Until he started chasing Eddington.
Until okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I did watch recently the first actually I ended up watching like 7 episodes of Deep Space Nine first season.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he did. First of all, Jennifer was fine. I was like, wow, I forgot how fine Jennifer was.
I would agree with you on that one. Like I was like, why?
I'd have been mad too.
Why did they get rid of her? And I'll be honest with you. I was just like, how did he pull her? Like it made no sense.
Well, when you're a demigod, you can pull anybody.
He was like, oh.
I mean, what? Even in the far-flung future, women can't be desperate. I don't know.
What? She had to be desperate to get with him?
No, and I don't think that I don't think that's what it was. It's really funny because I never thought of it that way. Like I never saw her as being out of his league.
I've never.
Go ahead.
I always thought the out of your league thing was kind of a weird concept. It's just one I've never had in my life. Like I've never seen a woman be like, she's out of my league.
I mean, they brought her back twice.
I'll go talk to her. If she turns me down, she turns me down. If she accepts me, she accepts me. I would never. I don't think anybody's out of other people's leagues. It's weird because you see people like, how did he get hurt? Well, he probably asked her out.
I mean, there's that, yeah.
Like.
And we actually do. That was pretty much his story. And we actually do see them get together. Like the prophets actually take us through that process, right?
Yeah, which was great.
He's burning his feet in the sand, and he accidentally steps on her and almost spilled lemonade on her.
But can you imagine, like, what he was going through? Like, it'd been some time since he lost her, and then all of a sudden he was there. Like, you lost your wife, but then you're there on the first day when you meet her, the first day you saw her. You know how excited he must have been, and then to go through that and to live that day again. You know how great that must have felt, and then suddenly be thrown into her death. Like right after that,
have that experience, and then to have that experience, that you reliving that experience, almost for another entity, to have all of your entire trauma pulled out and experienced just because some non-corporeal beings are confused. I mean,
well, yeah, because it's not like they were doing that to him. They were very clear. Like, we're not putting you in this place of her death. This
like you were making those choices, right?
You're here all the time. Why are you doing that? Then they couldn't understand why he was living in that place, where he was obviously distraught. But this is where he lived all the time.
Right. I mean, and that says something about grief, right? Like, I mean, when you experience that loss, you live there. You have to sit with it. And that's what Sisko's doing. I mean, going back to Jake too, can we just have a brief moment to appreciate how normal Jake was?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He was a regular kid. He very easily could have been like the new Black Wesley Crusher, but he wasn't. They chose to make him. I mean, I hesitate to say a person because I think Wesley was, but approachable in a way that I think Wesley Crusher wasn't.
First of all, if Wesley Crusher was not a fucking genius, he just would have been hated through and through. I mean, like he would have had he would have had no lovers for Wesley Crusher at all. Nobody. You know what I mean? That's what made him redeemable, was that he was a genius. Right.
Keith, what were you going to say?
Well, I would say there are some people that are more upset that he was a genius, especially like when he said, I always got an A. And like that pissed people off that he was a genius.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. It's like, oh, yeah.
Well,
No, what I was going to say with Jake, what really helps Jake is the fact that he had Nog to bounce off of. He had another
Yes.
kid, so it wasn't. I mean, Wesley was the odd man out. Even if, when you did have the one episode with the other kids, and it's still he was like a step above all of them. Whereas Jake, pretty much from the beginning, it was Jake and Nog, or J Nog, or Nog J.
Jog. It was Jog.
The Nog consortium.
The Nog J consortium.
I do hate that they settled on just the two of them though, and there's a whole starship, a whole what is it? What is that place? It's not a
Space
starship.
station.
Space station. But they, it was only two kids that can hang out. I kind of do wish they would have had a couple more.
Well, there was. Remember that when Keiko had the school and.
Yeah, but there were no main character. Like there should have been at least a Bajoran boy, a girl that they hung out with all.
Right. But ultimately, it ended up being like everybody else is constantly in flux, right? But Nog and Jay are Nog and Jake are just kind of stuck on the station together, and they make the best of it. And it's just this phenomenal friendship.
I actually got one more question, and then if we would segue back to Benjamin, how does it speak to Jake's character development when he was in that phaser battle with the Klingons, and he I think that's where he got his real PTSD from.
I was not a fan of that episode
because he's not a soldier.
Yeah.
So they were trying to show what reporters go through on the battlefield, right? Or what they could go through.
Yeah. Sort of. I mean, it was more showing how Jake was not. The real difference between him and Wesley was that he was not Starfleet. He was never going to be Starfleet.
He was not his father.
Yeah.
But that's the point too. That reporters...
I loved that we didn't see that automatic transition from, growing up as a Starfleet kid to going into Starfleet. I love that Jake decided to do something completely different, because I think we struggle a little bit with world building in Star Trek because it's so Starfleet focused, right? So getting the opportunity to see somebody doing something different in this world, I think, is huge.
But that also misses out on the fact that he went through that and he had, that traumatized him. That misses out on the fact that they could have had several episodes where he was going to go to a zone to report a story. I mean, real reporters do this all the time, right? And they go through it, and they know it's a battle zone, and they go anyway.
I mean,
I think it depends on the flavor of reporter, though.
Sure, but I just mean it could have been another story of him that going to a zone to report a story.
Because I mean, there's a certain way in which I am a journalist, but I do not go into war zones anymore.
I mean, Jake did stay behind for like half a season while the Dominion took over the station. I mean,
which is amazing, and and he does that because he wants to show what the occupied station is going to look like.
True.
And I don't want us to be remiss. Manny left us a message. He said, "Star Trek Deep Space Nine changed Star Trek forever. Sisko allowed us to see people of color as show leads." Any thoughts about that?
A question, really? Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, oh, absolutely. I thought it was, as a black male, I thought it was great. Definitely in terms of Star Trek. I don't know if people kind of looked at it all like, I'm sure somebody did. Like, oh, great, now they got to throw a black guy in as captain. But I think most of it across the board, I think he was well liked, and his character and especially his relationship with his son, which was definitely positive. I think.
So I don't know if it was because I was living in Louisiana at the time, but not everyone that I came in contact with was excited about that particular character.
Why?
I mean, I can't speak for them, but I remember the comments. I remember a lot of people were like, why? We had Kirk, we had Picard, now we're getting him. What's the and
for the same reason people complained about Michael Burnham.
Right.
You mean because he's black, or just because they're doing another show, or because
he was black?
He was black.
He was black.
Okay.
So there was pushback, because I was about to ask that without Marie throwing her shoe at me. Like, what was it like at that point when it came out? What was the general response?
A lot of people really struggled with Deep Space Nine for a long time, and it's really funny because you'll hear in fandom communities this narrative of, well, I didn't like it at first, but now that I've gone back and given it a chance, it's amazing. And all
That's
the
me.
rest of us who were actually DS9 fans are like, no shit. If I may, if I may.
Right.
But a lot of it was just this whole conversation of like, why do we have to put a black man in charge? And it was just kind of like, why not?
Right.
Like
Right.
why? I mean, what
And
does the color of his skin have to do with his capability of taking command of a of a space station?
And to be fair, I remember hearing similar comments about Janeway, and by that point,
Mhm.
people had gotten used to Cisco, and so it was like, okay, but why do we have this woman? And it blew my mind. It's like, why are we having this conversation when we finally dealt with that? You should have learned the lesson from this, transpose it to this,
And
and
then we get to Michael Burnham, right? Like we flash forward to Michael Burnham, and I was having flashbacks to this, right? Like to these initial conversations about like, well, women can't be in charge of starships. We know they can't be in charge of starships. We've all seen Turnabout Intruder. And I mean, it was just.
Well, yeah, I remember some of that. Even people saying, "How dare they talk about her being the first black woman when we had Cisco and Janeway?" But no, that's two different people.
Right.
Right.
Looking at the casting, they weren't aiming for a black man. I mean, Peter Capaldi would audition for the role. I mean, this was
Wow.
Abel
Really?
Brooks was just so good that they made the role they rewrote the role for him.
But is it terrible to say that I'm deeply grateful for Avery Brooks?
Why is that? No, it's not terrible to say.
Because Avery, like, I grew up in the rural South with all of the baggage that entails, right?
Mhm.
And I grew up white in the rural South with all of the baggage that entails. Yeah. So for every awful message that was given to me, I had Captain Sisko, right?
Okay.
And it was an incredibly valuable foil to the messaging that I was receiving. And I can only imagine. I mean, obviously, I'm not there and I didn't have this experience, but I can only imagine how valuable it would have been for persons of color to see Sisko take charge, right? If I am having, like if I am being deprogrammed by Star Trek, right?
How's that affecting other people? Right.
Exactly.
I actually think it affected me more later on than it did at first. I mean, first of all, my dad was a captain, so that's one of those things that's like a little bit normal for me.
A captain in what? If you
Well, he flew airliners.
okay.
First, he flew helicopters in the
And
war,
then
Vietnam War.
okay.
And then he was in the Air Force, and then he, flew for American Airlines. But
Right.
so maybe for me it was a little bit more normal. It's like college was for me a bit more normal than some other people
Right.
in their
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
But I think emotionally, I think I understood it more when I got a bit older.
Mhm. Manny also says the father-son story was much better writing for him. Keith, any
Because
thoughts
it's
about
the
that?
first time we see an honest to God parent in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because I mean, I think Beverly Crusher really, really tries to be a mom, but I don't think that. So I think Deep Space Nine benefits greatly from being the dark horse of '90s Trek
Definitely.
because Rick Berman didn't care, right?
Yeah.
So that meant that Deep Space Nine could go off and do much more interesting, nuanced storytelling than you could get in TNG or Voyager.
Right. And they
even
always, as far as Picard having a family, like or what's the other guy's name? Kirk having like they just feel like that would just derail the whole system in their eyes. Like how could he have a family?
Right, but here is Sisko who was doing his best to be a good dad. Does he succeed all the time? No, but like nobody does. No parent ever does. And I loved that we got the opportunity to see those failures.
And like
Can we
Kirk,
segue real back to Keith? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, my bad.
well, it was very clear that in the original series, Kirk considered himself married to the Enterprise, and Picard considered his crew to be his family and his duty to be his companion, and not so much the ship itself, but his role in Starfleet. For Sisko to have that more, and plus just the incredibly powerful image of you having a strong black father-son relationship on television in the 90s, which at that time was very, very uncommon. It just being able for them to show that the connection between them and how much caring there was between them. And that's something I helped. Beverly Crusher left Wesley on the Enterprise for a year. I mean, of course, Gates McFadden got fired. But to think that there was a lot more emotion in watching Jake stay behind on the station than we saw of Wesley staying behind on the Enterprise.
Yeah, because Jake has real agency over it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was Jake's choice. Where Wesley, it's just kind of like, well, she left and I guess I'm still here. It's almost like she forgot to take Wesley with her.
I'm sorry, I was packing and I had to throw in my terrible leotards into my bags, but not my son. Right.
There was only so much room on the shuttle, and I had all this luggage.
Well, here's your new mom, Dr. Pulaski.
No.
Oh no.
See Marie?
Riker his dad. Riker was put in charge.
No, you will not bring that up because I want to continue loving you, William.
Okay. All right.
And Manny, I know you're watching. I'm still thinking about you too.
I do have a question. How has I feel cheated we didn't get Star Trek Emissary? Star Trek Emissary, is that like what, I don't know, season? Wait a minute. That was the fan made what was it?
Yeah, someone made fan made credits.
Yeah, but let's be real. I mean, Avery Brooks is not coming back to Star Trek.
He made it clear. He made it quite clear.
Yeah.
Like yeah, but I did have a question for how has Benjamin's parenting affected your parenting?
Oh.
With my dog?
You know what?
That's what I want to hear. That is the content.
Jason, tell us all about you and your dog. Please.
We do not discriminate.
No, go ahead.
No, I want to hear about the dog.
I want to hear about the dog too.
He's over there, He doesn't learn the difference between pants and shoes. Get my pants, get my shoes. He doesn't know the difference. Bothers me. Whatever.
Are you making your dog, bring you things?
Yes. I do.
Okay.
I try, put it that way. Wait, who else has kids? Jermaine, you don't have kids, do you?
I do. I have a son.
Oh, you do have a son.
Yeah. I will say this. Considering my age and where I grew up, affection wasn't something that was given to you at all. But I saw that it was okay to be affectionate.
Wait, you saw it when you became a father?
The relationship between
you told me. Okay, I got you.
Basically a healthy relationship.
Seriously, like Sisko hugs his son on camera.
Yes. How often do we see a father do that with his son on camera?
Right.
Like instead of that destroyed version we saw in Moesha. I don't know if y'all have seen that show or not. But it's just like almost for a lot of shows that I've noticed in the 90s and early 2000s, first you have this black father who in the beginning is like great, but then they find some way to low-key kind of break his character and ruin it. And I'm just like, oh, come on. Can we just, I'm not saying that he has to be perfect. Like to Marie's point earlier, Benjamin doesn't always make the best decisions, but at the same time, he's not a I mean, I guess he can be a jerk sometimes, but he's not a bad father, you know?
Right.
Like, I mean, you can make mistakes and still be a good father, you know?
Oh, you
Like,
will make mistakes. I mean, you
yeah,
can't.
It's kind of interesting. The two best, really, when you look at the best black fathers on TV in the 90s, both are named Avery. Avery Brooks and James Avery on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
True.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
not to put down Reginald Val Johnson on Family Matters, but James Avery was a whole nother level.
Right.
I mean, yeah, we love Uncle Phil.
We say Bill Cosby, but I guess that was in the 80s.
I said
right?
90s.
Right. I mean, speaking as I
I was
my
trying not to
parents were
say.
divorced by the time that I was 4. But
Sorry, man.
like I lived with my mom and sometimes I lived with my dad. But so I had a dad like my entire life. It depending on even if I was living with my mom, I saw my dad all the time. So I was lucky enough not to have that like separation, uh, or feel that quote like
I
black
guess
father not
I,
around
I think I actually kind of want to go back to Jermaine's point though about affection, because I do think there is a very real divide between between fathers and sons and fathers and daughters and fathers and their children, and being able to express that emotion in a healthy way.
right.
Well, my dad, when I was a teenager, my dad would do that. He'd be like, "Okay, all right, give your father a hug," and I would be like, "Oh, okay, whatever." Give this dude a hug.
Yeah, but I
And it-
think
and
what's fascinating about the way Brooks and the writers' room chose to portray Sisko is there's not really no one's being penalized for their emotions here, right? Like, I mean, there's none of this. You should not cry because
Man,
I mean, you shouldn't cry because it's not manly.
Yeah, the
Like, you shouldn't
Right.
hug your child because that's not manly. There's none of this sort of toxic masculinity, and it's and there are moments when Sisko stumbles on this, right? Because it is the 90s,
right.
and we've come so far, I think, in understanding how to teach our children to have healthier relationships with their emotions than we do.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that was, but I think the fact that there was never any question in Jake's mind that his father loved him
Beautiful.
is huge.
Oh, right,
Beautiful.
right.
Right. And that wasn't always the case.
I just want to add something to what you just said, Marie. Not just that his father loved him, but that his father actually even liked him.
Mm-hmm.
Respect
For who
him
he
when
was.
wanted to
But
do
I
more.
think even
whatever.
let's take that further, because I like this. That his father knew him.
Mm.
Well, yeah, when Jake made it clear he did not want to be in Starfleet, Ben stopped pushing. He let him be the person he wanted to be. And
Right.
he did not hold a grudge. I mean, in season 7, he wasn't like, "Oh, you should have joined Starfleet." No, he accepted Jake as the man he wanted to be.
And that's huge, right? I mean, because I think there really was, especially in the 90s, this very, very real sense that fathers were meant to be hands off.
Basically, the difference between Worf and Cisco. Let's just put it out there.
Right?
Man, look.
Right?
Look, I'm sorry. Look, because I'm gonna tell it to you because
Yeah.
Marie, make it if you would just complete.
Send the boy away.
Yeah. What Marie? Oh, you were saying in that.
Oh no! Like every time we talk about Worf's A+ parenting, I kind of want to cry.
Okay, so
I mean, because Worf, I mean, and in Worf's defense, the man had no idea that he was about to have a child.
I mean, yeah.
And Worf himself was working through a tremendous amount of trauma on his own, and I just don't think he had the bandwidth to care for Alexander. I also don't think that. I mean, I hate to go back to Berman, but like Berman era Trek is really grounded in some unfortunate concepts of toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And And I think that's some of why, Worf couldn't be a father to Alexander, because, men weren't nurturing. Men couldn't have that relationship with their children. And then we get Deep Space Nine with our Stephen Bear going, no, sit and spin, boo-boo. That is not in fact true. We can do this. And again, it's also so huge, because the relationship between Jake and Sisko has this whole, just as a counter narrative to the absentee black father.
It's weird, and I guess it's because, and I know this happens a lot, but you said Worf was going through a lot, but it's like you find out you have a child, you still know what a child is and what it like needs. So I'm not saying that, I'm sure it happens a lot, but I guess I'm just lucky that I haven't run into that a lot, because everybody in my family takes care of their kids. Every one of my friends, whether married or not, takes care of this. My cousin just found out this kid was his. She's already 5 years old. She's around all the time now. Like he just met her when she was 5. And I think
that's awesome.
I think it's like, I know it happens a lot, but I've never really understood why it happens so much, with men and their children.
William?
Can I answer from the perspective of the son? Okay, so ignoring what we know about my particular sperm donor, but early on, I did feel kind of bad that it's like I didn't really have a father, and so I was kind of like somewhat understanding of what Alexander was going through to a very small extent,
Yeah.
where in the end, the particular men of color, and of course black men where I'm from, they were not affectionate. They yelled at you, or they showed affection for you by maybe getting you something to eat at the most, or maybe buying you a bike, something to that effect. Because the way they were taught, the way they grew up, is that to show love to your family, you have to take care of them and provide for them and pay for this and pay for that, but not necessarily show love and affection, because if you do, that makes you less of a man and weak.
Yeah.
And I've been told that all of my life until I graduated college, and then I hit 6'3", and then no one said shit to me else. But kind of changes. But growing up throughout all that time, it's just like, if you're not man enough, then you're by way of insult, you're gay. You're not a man. You're all these other insults that we know that I really don't want to repeat on here, that some of us been called. So it's like I'm very glad to see, even though TNG remains my favorite, I would still say that Deep Space Nine has the most character development and the most affection and the most love, whereas it's like I didn't get any. So that's why it's just like, as some of you know, Star Trek to me is very therapeutic. Whereas men still today will yell at me or say this and say that, and where and the most they'll give you as a handshake, and that's it. What about a hug? What about like that shoulder to shoulder, all that stuff? Like, what about that?
Right.
But instead, I'm less of a man because I'm affectionate, because I care, because I use a soft tone voice. Whereas in this country, I can't even use my full masculine deep tone voice, because people are already afraid of me as it is, because of what I look like and how and what my color, what my skin color is, and they're afraid of me when I walk around the corner. When I walk around the corner, they jump. But I see this figure on Deep Space Nine, Benjamin Sisko, and I was not afraid of him. I loved him. It's just like, you can have your masculinity, retain your masculinity, and still be loving and affectionate. My own mother, I'm not even gonna speak on my father. My own mother didn't even like it when I said, "Hey, I want to do media, I want to do filmmaking, I want to do acting." She said, "No, you're gonna be a lawyer. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do that. You're gonna do that." I'm like, "Come on!" But that
best decision you ever made is not going to law school.
Right. but that scene where in that moment, Benjamin dropped everything, and there wasn't a moment of disappointment look on his face. There wasn't. I was like, yo, so it is possible to have a father and he's like a good one. No one is asking for a perfect one, but
Right.
it is very possible. And so because I don't want to go around having daddy issues, and then when I have kids, and then I take my anger out on them like it's The Color Purple all over again. I don't want to do that. Like, no, I
Well,
actually want to.
I think men in general, I think they do have this. I think it's hard for them to walk this line of strength and emotion, uh, because like you said, people are gonna be like, "Oh, you gay?" It's just like,
Yeah.
that's like the worst thing you call a dude that's not gay.
Yes.
It is
That was
gay,
the one.
right? That's
Like,
um,
Right,
and
but I'd
we don't.
argue that that's actually grounded in misogyny, though.
Oh yeah. I'm
One
sure
hundred
it is.
percent. Which
But men don't know like what it is. It's hard for them to understand when they should be strong and when they should be emotional. And if they're emotional, does that mean that they're not strong?
and I think
And
that's
it's
really the better question in that entire conversation is whether or not, right, is can I be strong and emotional? Well, the answer to that is yes, right? Um, because seriously, think about some of the strongest people you know.
okay.
They're not strong because they have excised their emotions. They're strong because they've worked through them and they understand better ways of expressing and dealing with them.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's also why, and I want to bring this up for Jermaine's point in the chat. I think that's also why Sisko is the only captain that we can point a finger to that has a successful relationship.
yeah.
Yes.
Because this is where we get Cassidy Yates, and he has this amazing ability to appreciate Cassidy's strengths and let her be all the things that she needs to be, and also send her to jail when she needs to go.
I was just gonna say that.
Yes. How long did she go, by the way?
It wasn't very long, like
8
half a
months.
season or something like that. A
Right.
season.
I mean, I think she maybe, I think she maybe got the same as that fella down in, what was it, Oklahoma or Texas that like the 180 days.
Wow. She was
Then
in
she went and got her a black president. And went to jail again, I think.
Right. I mean, because like God knows Picard didn't never manage this because Picard got like weirdly in his head about the whole business of can I send my romantic partner into danger? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You can
Because
trust her to handle her. You can trust her to handle her shit if you can handle your shit. That whole relationship breaks down because Picard cannot handle his shit.
Right.
Yeah. That would have been so awesome if they carried that relationship for at least
Right?
half a season.
But Sisko is freed from all of that because Sisko has fully integrated, his emotional life with his rational life, right? Like, I mean, there's not any of this weird sort of cognitive dissonance between these two elements. And if nothing else, I think Sisko himself there as a character is so much more advanced and evolved than any of the other characters that we can really point to. And I include Burnham in this, by the way.
Well, one thing, the reason I feel that the relationship also works so well was, remember that she was introduced to Ben by Jake, that she had Jake's seal of approval before he had even met her. Then that, just knowing that if his son likes this woman and sees her as someone that could make his dad happy, then maybe he really needs to take a shot at this.
Yeah, but the caveat of that is that, like, at the same time, you don't want to break your heart. Your son's heart is already filled, and you don't want to break that, right? Like his expectation of what you're going to do and what's going to happen. Because in his head, he's already, even when he saw Jennifer, right? He's already written in his head that they're going to get married or something like that. So,
So right now, I do want to, because we're at like almost 45 minutes. I did want to talk about Sisko the tactician.
Ooh,
right, we were talking about the emotional stuff. Let's talk about the hard stuff, the hard decisions.
Ooh, are we going to In the Pale Moonlight already?
Beautiful.
Because I actually think that's the best image. That's the best portrayal of Sisko as the tactician. I understand that we've got some of like the Eddington issues, But I would actually argue that he's not a great tactician in those episodes because he's too emotionally involved. But with In the Pale Moonlight, he's actually able to recognize the best way to use the resources available to him, i.e., Garrick.
It's like every show has their bad captain episode, but this one really, he's really self-analyzing himself, right? And he knows what he's done, and if he
How
would
far will he go?
do it all over again.
How far is he
Also,
willing to
can
go?
we
That's
can
what
we
it is.
talk about the fact that like Sisko gets a self-analysis episode, whereas none of the other captains do?
Beautiful, beautiful monologue. Beautiful.
I mean, seriously, point to a captain that has that. Even like the greatest episode that Kirk has as a tactician is Balance of Terror. And there is never a discussion of Kirk's thought processes there. Right.
And just the visuals too of Sisko as he's telling the story. He's removing the layers of his uniform. He is bearing his soul, both in voice but also physically.
DS9 has some of the best staging.
Yes.
There is like I think some of the costume designers and the directors had a much greater experience with theater than I think some of the others in some of the other episodes.
Well, also remember Deep Space Nine had a lot more, typical bottle shows because they weren't going to other planets every week. They almost half the episodes were on the station in the same old sets they used over and over again. So they had to be creative in how they used those sets to make them unique.
Well, one thing I didn't like about Deep Space Nine was the fact that there was no LCARS, right? There was just
the light because it was a Cardassian station.
It was a Cardassian station, and like to me, it's like what? But like that to me, I loved LCARS. Like I was like, I'm putting this on my computer, man, and then all this other stuff.
I literally have it on my watch. Not gonna lie, but
they got rid of that, and I guess I just didn't like the set design at first, where it was just so much Bajoran. I'm so used to seeing Starfleet here everywhere, but now I'm looking at Cardassian and Bajoran stuff, so I think that threw me off a bit. What were you going to say?
When they first started developing the show, it was supposed to be a colony, and then some higher ups at Paramount said, "Hey, what about if we put it on a space station?" And them, throwing in the stuff from J. Michael Straczynski's.
I was about to say because that's not how that went, but okay. Yeah, no, like let's blatantly steal the idea from JMS. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm really grateful that we got Babylon 5.
Right.
Yes.
Because Babylon 5 is a really fantastic show. It's just, it ends up being a very different show, despite the similarities. And I honestly think some of that has to do with the fact that we had Sisko as a black man on the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but he was never a black man on the show.
I would disagree with that.
Well, I thought
I'm sorry, I'm not going to say never for the most part.
There's literally a number of lines where he's just like, I'm not going to visit Vic Fontaine because people who looked like me would not have been welcome.
Right.
Well, this was my original standing of the casting of Deep Space Nine was that there was of course Avery Brooks, and then we have a number of other people up for this character, and they weren't all necessarily African American. It was when they casted him as Benjamin Sisko that the rest of the story, as far as a cultural level goes, panned out. Right? Like is my fact straight on that?
No, you're right.
What a lot of people don't know is that I can never say his name. The guy who played Bashir, he was originally cast as Sisko.
He was.
Oh yeah.
Yes, he was. And when he showed up, they were like, "Nah."
Because to be fair, Siddig had a baby face, right? Like, he looked about 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't until season 6 that he started to, age.
And even now, he does not look as old as he is.
You know that genetic engineering, right?
I mean, let's
That's
talk
what it
about
is.
silver foxes, but
Amazing what genetics can do.
but yeah, like, I mean, could you imagine trying to do something like Far Beyond the Stars if, say, Peter Capaldi had been Sisko?
No, you couldn't have done it. I mean, not only because the basics of the but remember Avery Brooks also directed that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gorgeous. It's just absolutely breathtakingly painful and gorgeous.
So I just want to go back for a second. So for me, when Sisko decided that he was going to, figuratively, not literally, get in bed with with the Romulans,
I'm glad you cleared
by
that.
way of Garrick, what I was excited about that. I was excited about that because what I knew, number one, the Dominion, all of that. All right, how can the Federation win? I can't see a way in which the Federation can win. But when he started thinking that line of I've got to do something different, I was like, yes, please do something different. It was going to change. It was going to change the show, and I was so excited about that.
And what the thing about it is I don't really feel like it necessarily changed the show. I think it just solidified what the show was. Does that make any sense?
No, when I say change the show, I'm talking about Star Trek. I'm not necessarily talking about Deep Space Nine. I'm talking about Star Trek.
Okay, because Deep Space Nine had been pushing that envelope for quite some time. I mean, we'd actually seen characters make bad choices and have to deal with the ramifications of those choices, which was novel to 90s Trek, right? Like, I mean, does anybody remember The Quickening?
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Bashir had to deal with failure in a way that we'd never really seen anybody before. Right. We'd had arcs with, the Torture O'Brien arcs, but we had arcs with O'Brien dealing with the fallout of having been in the Cardassian conflict. Right. And yeah, some of that started with TNG, but it wasn't. But with TNG, it was kind of a one and done episode, right?
Yeah.
And then when we get to Deep Space Nine, suddenly we have this amazing space for Colin Meaney to develop this character, right? Because again, Berman didn't care, Deep Space Nine was allowed to do whatever it wanted to do over in its corner because nobody really cared.
Yeah.
And as a result, I think of all of them, Deep Space Nine has aged the best. Because it is about those relationships. It is about character development. It is about, imperfect people trying to do the best they can in the situations in which they find themselves. There's and a lot of the episodes don't have pat happy endings. I mean, does anybody remember like the one where Bashir and Miles end up on that planet with the Jem'Hadar that are trying to kick the Ketracel White addiction?
Right. Yeah. The Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah.
Thank you. I could not remember the name of this episode. But what's
trying to help him
awful about that episode is O'Brien and Bashir get beamed out, but we know those Jem'Hadar are going to die. And on top of that, they're going to tear their captain apart. Yeah. And he knows it. We know it. Everybody knows it. That would never have flown on TNG or Voyager.
Right. And O'Brien was surely happy about that prospect, about that happening, but I'm sure Bashir was not.
We did have the episode Deep Space Nine where Sisko and O'Brien end up with the people that have been stranded, and you had Sisko standing up to the leader who she was trying to exert her authority over him, and he was not willing to accept it.
Right.
He kept on the hot box.
Yes.
Or the Siege of AR 558, right? Where the one who survives is the least Starfleet of all of them. And that was a deliberate choice. right? Those are, I mean, this is why I say that Deep Space Nine, stands a greater test of time. I'm really interested in looking forward to next week when we talk about Michael Burnham, as to whether or not Discovery is going to age better.
Ooh.
Age better, probably not. But
the thing about it is we don't know, because remember, so many people dismissed Deep Space Nine because how many of those episodes actually had just abysmally poor ratings and viewership?
But like you said, Deep Space Nine is the one show that is mostly it's a soap opera. It's a drama. It's like there's so much writing within the characters that no other Star Trek actually has that. Most of them are episodic, right? But
they don't have to be.
They don't have to be. I mean, I was going to say Archer was another person who actually, once he's out there in the expanse, totally pushes the lines of what he's willing to do to get the job done, to save planet Earth.
Right. The problem is they can't, like, the writing can't seem to decide if we're dealing with Picard or Sisko, right? Like, I mean, and that's kind of the problem. And no one manages, like, and at no point do we ever get like consistent characterization for Archer. Right. In the 4 years that Enterprise was on the air. Because some of it is like, we expect Sam Beckett because most of us were acquainted with Scott Bakula from Quantum Leap, right? And some of that is just like this weird, we're just going to let Archer coast on by because Archer looks like the captain we expect him to look like.
Yeah. I mean,
does anybody else remember the Cogenitor?
I remember the Cogenitor. I was more so earlier thinking about what Archer did by stealing that one alien's warp.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where he legitimately leaves them to die in space.
And it's like back to, and we have like 4 minutes left, well, 3 minutes left. Every show has that bad captain episode, probably except TNG, because I can't think of anything that Picard really did. But
I'd say best of both worlds.
Oh God, I mean, well, yeah, that worked.
But also, is that really Picard or the board?
Yeah,
yeah,
it was Locutus.
So
there's an intervening causal factor there,
right?
Because we've got to save Picard. But like, I would argue that is a decision that Sisko would have made. But Sisko would have wrestled with it a whole lot more than Archer did.
Yeah,
because Archer lacks the self-awareness that we see in Sisko and in the Pale Moonlight.
Sisko was willing to, eradicate an entire planet just to catch Eddington, though.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. He wasn't willing to eradicate. I mean, he was willing to poison the atmosphere so long as we could get the people off and, like, basically perform a planetary flip-flop.
Yeah. And it was a case of poisoning it for humans, but Cardassians could live there after the Maquis had poisoned our Cardassian settlement, so that Cardassians couldn't live there.
Right. It's literally a planetary flip-flop.
Right.
I mean, which goes back to Jermaine's question about Sisko's thoughts about being a tactician. The problem I have with that is that he's making just ridiculously broad decisions for lots of people without their consent because he's just pissed at Eddington.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He doesn't take betrayal very well.
No.
Is betrayal against him or betrayal against Starfleet?
Yes.
Right. Well, people get so enamored when it's like you're betraying Starfleet. It's like our whole ancestral heritage, our whole house is falling. Basically,
it's the family. It's the Starfleet family.
It's not even that. I would actually argue it's legitimately Because one of the things that Starfleet, and I'm sorry, Jermaine, I know this is running over. Just give me a second. Because I can see your frustration. I can.
I was about to pitch it to Keith.
Okay, in a second, like I promise, Keith, I'll give it to you. But I would actually argue that what we're seeing is this tension between the individual and the institution. And because what's happening is the world of the Federation is grounded in institutions and respect for institutions, because Star Trek itself grew out of the 60s when we were establishing, and by we I mean the Americans, were establishing international institutions. Okay? So baked into the series DNA is this reverence for the power of institutions, this idea that institutions can be inherently good, which I don't disagree with necessarily. The problem is that when Star Trek, and also, well, our whole worldview comes into contact with situations that our institutions aren't set up to address, that's when things begin to break down. So what Eddington is doing is Eddington is calling into question Sisko's faith in the institution, which is something we know that Star Trek doesn't handle well. I mean, Errand of Mercy, Day of the Dove, in a weird way, Conspiracy and TNG.
Friday's Child.
Yes, Friday's Child. Oh, God.
I think that whole thing of institution is something that was the United States also sort of tried to build into itself. Like after World War II, United States could have just taken over the world in a second, right? They had to build fundamental values within the institution of the United States. Just be like, okay, this is what we gotta like. We have to actually stand for something because we're the only ones on this planet that have this weapon, and we could literally take over everyone if we wanted to.
I mean, except that's not what happened. But Keith, I'm sorry.
You don't think so?
No, we had the Cold War. We had them at the Soviet space.
But they didn't have it at first. They didn't have it at first.
It did not take them long, my dude.
It did not.
It did not. But what we have as part of our narrative of American exceptionalism is our institutions are better. And I would argue that the last 8 years have called that into question in a very real way, because we're actually seeing internal politics actually undermine and erode the sanctity of those institutions.
I have a front row seat for it. It's pretty awesome.
SCOTUS. I'm sorry.
Yes, so we understood.
Keith. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Keith. That took long.
No, it's okay. It's all right. Okay. So are we doing news lists or just...
I don't know. Jermaine was just yelling at me to shut up. So like, it's your turn now.
I was just looking at Jermaine.
It's on you, Keith.
Okay. Well, and I'll just say that watching I wasn't that into Deep Space Nine at the start, mainly because I was in at the tail end of TNG. When you had the two-part episode in season 3, not blocking on the names. Improbable Cause and the Die is Cast. That's when you had the Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order trying to attack the Dominion. And those were the first episodes with Ira Stephen Bear as showrunner. And then you come back, the next episode is Explorers. And that's when Sisko starts to grow the beard. That's when Lita is introduced, and there's so many changes there.
And of course, we have Garrick dealing with the Nabrantane fallout.
Yes. But I definitely can say, from watching the show, that actually, obviously because of the archetype of being the white man of Irish heritage, I saw Chief O'Brien as my archetype, and he has made me a better father from having seen the portrayal of it on that show. But I definitely also got a lot of wisdom out of Sisko as well. But, all right, just wrapping up the news list. We have Patrick Stewart is receiving a Television Show Person of the Year award for his work on Star Trek Picard. It'll be a ceremony in March. Terry Matalas has been nominated for a Writers Guild Award for the Last Generation, the series finale episode of season 3 of Picard. Mike McMahon and Tawny Newsome have been doing interviews talking up Star Trek Lower Decks season 5 and how it's crazy, and how last season they had the overarching storyline. They're not doing that this season. That was just a one-off for that season. And some pictures have leaked from the filming of Strange New Worlds season 3, and one of them showing Christina Chong back in her dress as the princess with her dog that we saw in season 1 episode, The Elysian Kingdom. So somehow they're going to re-reference that fantasy episode again.
All right, Jermaine, you're going to have to give it a chance if they do.
It's hard to believe Lower Decks is season 5, and then Discovery is also season 5.
I am also really disappointed we haven't made any further progress on Legacy.
Yeah, they keep on. Matalas said last week there's nothing about it. And I started following this one YouTuber, Sidetrek, in which he basically said it's a done deal. This is everything I've heard, and then 2 weeks later, none of that stuff that he said is about to be announced has come true. So, yeah.
So stop following that guy.
Yeah, I started watching his videos. No.
Follow Trekker's Delight instead.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's our last word. Until next time, see you all next week.
Wait, Jason, on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious are you being right now? I gotta know.
I'm serious, dude. You got
like 10 out of 10 serious, or picking on Michael serious? Which one?
There is no temperature in space. It's not cold.
What are you serious?
Okay, wait.
Who is? Oh dear God! It just got
because you
better.
said his name.
Welcome to the party, Michael.
No, that is not how we're going to end the episode, because Keith actually has like a legitimate news update. He knows shit, and we should possibly like convey that knowledge.
That's my favorite line. He knows shit.
It's just like a black and red mound. It's like,
why are you describing yourself?
What the hell?
Hello from
Hey, Virgil.
Hey,
Virgil.
welcome.
Hello, Virgil. Welcome. Who are you?
Who?